Hi class, in this video we are talking about liking, loving, and connecting. And so the first thing I'm going to do is to talk about a Harvard study on connection. It is a study that has been going on at Harvard for many years. It started gosh, it's been a while. It's like 70 years now. It is called, it has been called a few things. It has been called the Grant study, the Valent study, the Gluck study, lots of different things. It's been called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. The person who is the chair of this, or the director of this study, is Waldinger. He is, I believe, the third one. It's a longitudinal study where they took a bunch of students at Harvard, and at that time it was a male-only school, and then a bunch of guys of the same age who just lived in Boston, and they followed them for 70 years. To figure out all sorts of different things. What helps you be successful, what helps you be healthy, all of it. And what they found was that loneliness is a risk factor for stressors turning into disease. Lonely people tend to have less efficient sleep patterns, higher blood pressure, they heal more slowly when wounded. And when we talk about the importance of relationships in order to combat these negative things, it does not just mean marriage. It's not that, if you're not married, you're doomed. Relationships can be friendships. And even people who are married can be lonely. Feeling alone is not necessarily always the exact same thing as being alone. So being isolated from people is what causes these problems. So we're going to start with liking. What attracts us to others? What gets them to like us? And Dale Carnegie has some advice. He wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he says if you want people to like you, you should be pleasant, you should pretend you like them, you should feign an interest in things they're interested in, shower them with praise, be agreeable, don't criticize, and use their name as often as possible. These things are only true in the early stages of getting to know someone. Yes, it's true that we like people who have pleasant characteristics. We like people who agree with us. We like people who like us. We like people who cooperate with us. All of these things are true. We like people who praise us. However, if you are going to go deeper, it takes more than that for the relationships that go beyond surface level. So we're also going to talk about the research for the deeper relationships. Tibble and Kelly say that we calculate a person's value as a friend or a romantic partner partly by comparing what they bring to us with what we might get from another potential friend or romantic partner. So what is better about this person compared to other potential options? And so attraction is partly determined by our comparison level for alternatives. There are 5 factors that influence our choice of friends or lovers. And we will go through all these. Proximity, similarity, whether they like us, whether they are physically attractive, and something called the paradox of choice. So we are going to break each of these things down for you. The first thing I'm going to do is ask you a question. We're going to talk about proximity first. So my question for you is, which one is more true? Out of sight, out of mind, or distance makes the heart grow fonder? The answer is out of sight, out of mind. For this if the more you are around someone, the more you like them. When college students are asked who they like the best, who their best friend is on campus, college students who were randomly assigned to a dorm room most often named, like half of the time, named the person who lived in the room next to them. Chances are your closest friends at school are the people that were in your dorm, on your team, in a lot of your classes. You're around them, and so you like them. All other things being equal, people become more likable and more attractive to us as friends or lovers as they become more familiar to us. So how does dissonance play a part in this? If you know you're going to be stuck with someone, if you know you're going to see someone all the time because they live next to you, because you're going to see them at practice every day, dissonance will help you see their good qualities. Because why would you want to spend all this time with a horrible person? So you know if you can't change that being around them all the time, you're going to make sure that your thoughts about it line up, that you like them, that you think they are a good person. You're going to emphasize their good parts, de-emphasize the bad. And so this works out, again, it's not just friends, like who your best friend on campus is. This is also your romantic partners as well. When they did archival research in Philadelphia in the 30s, they found that 1/3 of people who got married in Philadelphia were raised within 5 blocks of each other. 1/6 had been raised on the same block, and 1 in 8 marriage certificates were from people who grew up in the same building together. You just see them all the time. You might as well marry them. Question for you before we get to the next one. For similarity, because that will be the next one we go over. Which one is more true? Birds of a feather flock together, or opposites attract? It is birds of a feather flock together. Opposites might attract at the beginning, but it's not going to stick. If people share our attitudes and our opinions, we assume they are uncommonly intelligent and thoughtful, and don't you want that as your friend? It's rewarding to hang out with intelligent and thoughtful people. You want to hang out with people who think like you. It also provides a social validation for our beliefs. It helps satisfy our desire to be right if we're hanging out with people who think like us. And so there's a couple ways that this goes. If we like someone for an irrelevant reason, we assume that they agree with us on bigger issues too. So if they like something small, you assume on deeper issues they're also of the same mind as you. And we like someone with attitudes that are similar to us. And if we like someone, we assume they have the same attitudes as us. We assume if we like them for another reason, they also agree with us on all these other issues. If we perceive similarity with someone, that is enough for us to like them, to think they are a good person. And so research done by Gelbach, they had high school teachers and students fill out a survey, and then they randomly assigned teachers and students to learn 5 similarities that they had with each other. So, hey, this is your teacher. Here's 5 things you have in common. Here's your student. Here's 5 things you have in common. And there was a control group that filled out the survey, but then they weren't told similarities they had between the students and the teachers. If they got that list of similarities, here is how you are like your teacher, here is how you are like your student, it increased their mutual feelings of liking and respecting each other. And this increase in liking each other, this increased relationship, was especially strong when it was a white teacher with a student of color. Seeing those similarities on that list overcame the perceived dissimilarity because of their race or ethnicity. Okay, so for the next thing, let me see one moment. Okay, I've got a question for you. I'm going to ask before I pull up the next slide. Do we like people who have pleasant attributes? Or once we like them, do we convince ourselves that they have pleasant attributes? The answer is it goes both ways. So we like people who have good qualities, and once we like them, we attribute good qualities to them. Some of these good qualities that can play a part. Competence. Competence is a cluster of qualities, things like smartness, ability to get things done, and wise decision making. And so we like people who are competent. In problem-solving groups, however, the most competent people are not the best liked. And the reason for that is basically they're just too good. If someone is too competent, then they make you uncomfortable because they seem unapproachable and distant, and they make you feel bad that you're not as amazing as them. So we like competent people, but we don't like people who are too competent. And so an experiment that Aronson, Willerman, and Floyd did connected with this is they had participants listen to a recording that they thought was of a guy who was auditioning for a college Jeopardy show, and they were asked to evaluate the guy. And half of the time, so there were 4 conditions. Half of the time, and actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show it to you this way. Half of the time, when they were listening to the tape, it was a guy who was superior. He got 92% of the questions correct. In high school, he'd been the yearbook editor, he'd been on the honor society, he'd been on the track team, just superior guy. Half of the time it was a mediocre guy. So he scored 30% on the test for this quiz show. He had been a proofreader for the yearbook. He tried out for the track team and didn't make it, and he was just an average student. He got C's. Now, the other condition for this was half the time during the recording, they heard him spill coffee on himself. And half of the time, he did not spill coffee on himself. So what question I want you to answer is, what was the order from most liked to least liked as they were listening to these recordings? And we'll, so was it, we'll have A be superior, B superior spilled, mediocre spilled coffee, C is superior not spilled, and D is mediocre no spill. What is the order? What was the most liked person, second most liked, third most liked, and fourth most liked? Okay, so the order for this, the number 1 liked person was the superior guy who spilled coffee on himself. Next came superior who didn't spill coffee. Then mediocre didn't spill coffee, and the least liked person was the mediocre guy who spilled coffee on himself. The reason for this is the pratfall effect. The pratfall effect is a phenomenon in which, even though a person has a high degree of competence, some evidence of fallibility increases his or her attractiveness. We get a lot of satisfaction and self-esteem of having highly competent friends and relatives, but we don't want them to be too perfect. Seeing little errors like that, like spilling coffee, makes us feel better about ourselves, which helps us to like them more. Also, we want these people to be competent in areas that matter, that don't matter as much to us. So if you, oh gosh, this is one reason why if 2 people are married and they're in the exact same field, it's a higher divorce rate, because you're always comparing yourself to that other person. And if they are more competent than you, it will decrease your attractiveness. So if you really care about soccer and you're on the team and you're dating someone who is on your team, won't be so great if one of you is a lot better than the other one and you play the same position, because they're going to be more competent and it's going to make you feel inferior. So we like competent people, but not if they're too competent. We like them to show little errors, and we want them to be competent in areas where we aren't trying to be competent ourselves. So that is competence. The next one to talk about is physical attractiveness. I won't ask you a question here because I don't think it's so shocking. We like cute people. So physical attractiveness is the most important characteristic in deciding if you want a second date with someone after a first date. But what I will ask you a question about is, who cares about looks more? Men, women, or is there no difference? There is no difference. In an analysis of over 29,000 people, they found that attractiveness matters equally to both sexes. Everyone wants to be with somebody cute. A few experiments connect with this. Walster had a set of students go on a blind date, and he gave them a battery of personality tests before these blind dates. The only determinant in whether a couple liked each other and repeated their date was physical attractiveness. None of the personality tests correlated to whether they wanted a second date, just how cute they were. In another experiment by Walster, they found that if a handsome man is paired with a beautiful woman, they are the most likely to want to see each other again. So it's that equal attractiveness that is important as well. For the White experiment, what they found was that they looked at long-term relationships at UCLA, and physical attractiveness mattered, but again, that similarity is really important. The similarity of the attractiveness of the partners was crucial in determining if they stayed together. So if you have a highly attractive person with another highly attractive person, that's going to last longer than if you have a highly attractive person with a moderately attractive person. For the Dion experiment, they showed college students photos of 3 college-age people. One was an attractive picture, one was an average person, and then one was an unattractive person. And they asked them to rate each picture, the person in the picture, on 27 different personality traits and predict how happy that person would be in the future, just based on the picture they had. The physically attractive people were assigned the more desirable traits, and they were given the greatest prognosis for future happiness. This was true for men who were rating women and men, and for women who were rating women and men. It wasn't just about their own attraction to the person, but sort of the objective, how cute is this person? If they're cute, we assume they have lots of good qualities and their life is going to be awesome. So next question, is what is considered beautiful evolutionarily based? There is some controversy about this. There's some debate on whether or not it is evolutionarily based. Some say yes, because some of the things that tend to be more universally attractive, like symmetrical faces, are associated with health and having healthy genes. Generally speaking, globally, women who are still fertile, who are younger, are more attractive than women who are postmenopausal, whereas men who don't go through something like menopause, they can keep their attractiveness longer. They are perceived as attractive longer than women who are of their same age. So these are signs that, yes, there's this evolutionary basis. You are attracted to people who seem healthy and able to provide offspring. However, some say it is culturally based. Do you want someone who is very thin? Do you want someone who is more likely to survive a famine? Do you want someone who is short, who is tall? These sorts of things are going to be more culturally based. The Western Association of Beautiful and good, though, is something that starts young. So your culture teaches you young, this is what beautiful is, and beautiful is good. So, for example, take the Disney movies you see, where all of the heroines have big eyes, shapely lips, they're all young, they are all athletic, slim, and the, villains in the Disney movies are going to be older. They're going to be uglier, have lots of blemishes. They're not necessarily going to be thin. That is this beautiful, good, ugly, bad correlation your culture teaches you from a young age. For some experiments connected with this, in one, they showed high school girls 15 commercials. Half of them, the ones in the experimental group, watched 15 commercials talking about beauty products, and the control group watched 15 commercials unrelated to beauty products. Then all of the women rated or ranked the relative importance of 10 attributes. Some of these attributes were related to attractiveness, like sexual appeal, pretty face, and some were not related, things like intelligence, industriousness. The experimental group, the ones who had watched the beauty product commercials, were more likely to consider beauty-oriented attributes as being more important than the other traits. They were picking this up from their environment, from the commercials, and it affected what they believed. For the Dion experiment, they had women evaluate reports of classroom disturbances that they thought were written by teachers. And there was a picture attached to the report of the kid that had supposedly caused the problems. If the picture was of a less attractive child, then they placed more blame on the kid for the disturbance, and they inferred that the behavior in that incident was typical of what that kid probably does all the time. If it was a cute kid in the picture, they didn't put as much blame on them, and they thought it was an isolated incident, not how the kid normally behaved. So this beauty thing, it's not just with peers, it's also if we are thinking about younger children. So these similar effects can be found at all ages, in all contexts. Even the business world, attractive workers get paid better and get promoted more often than their less attractive coworkers. However, there can be a downside of good looks that Aronson and Segal found. People can be harder on beautiful people who are critical than them. So in this research, what they did was they had a woman who they dressed up either attractively or unattractively using a wig and unflattering clothes. And then she interviewed male participants who were all heterosexual. And she gave each student a clinical each participant a clinical evaluation of them. Half of the participants received a favorable evaluation, half of them received an unfavorable evaluation. And so my question for you is, how did attractiveness affect the response to the evaluation? How did these participants rate this woman afterwards? Did they really like her, or did they really like her? Which category out of the four falls into the like category? Which falls into the unlike? For the attractive woman who gives a favorable evaluation, the attractive woman who gives an unfavorable evaluation, the unattractive woman who gives a favorable evaluation, the unattractive woman who gives an unfavorable evaluation. How did the men perceive her in those categories? Okay, so if she was attractive and said nice things about them, gave a highly valuable evaluation, they really liked her. They rated her very high. If she was unattractive and gave an evaluation, it didn't matter if it was favorable or unfavorable. They both liked her a little bit. So it did not matter what the evaluation was if she was unattractive. But if she was attractive and gave an unfavorable evaluation, they really disliked her. So that was the extreme shift was only in the attractive category. If she said nice things, really liked her. If she said mean things, they really rated her poorly. For this, it also connects, as we talk about, we think attractive people have good traits. Our thinking attractive people have good traits brings good traits out of them. So for Snyder, Decker, and Tank, and Berscheid's experiment, what they did was participants thought that they were participating in a study about how people become acquainted with each other, and they thought they were in the no nonverbal communication group. Nonverbal communication being body language. And the way to avoid that is to only talk over an intercom. You don't get to see the person. So they would have a conversation with a woman over an intercom. They were given a picture of who they thought they were speaking with. Half the time it was an attractive picture. Half of the time it was an unattractive woman in the picture. And if they thought she was attractive, as you would expect, they rated her as more poised, more humorous, more socially adept. Wow, this woman's cute. I'm having this great conversation. But the interesting part was a neutral observer listened in on the conversation that these two people had and did not have a picture of either of them. But the neutral observer who was listening in on the conversations between the man and a woman he thought was attractive also rated that woman as being more confident, more animated, more warm, and assumed she was probably attractive as well. Basically, when the male participant thought he was talking to an attractive woman, he spoke to her in a way that brought out her best qualities, that made her more confident, more funny, a better person to have a conversation with. That is the self-fulfilling prophecy. So we assume attractive people have better traits, and so we treat them in such a way that it brings out those better traits. Psychology can also affect our perception of beauty. So someone we really like becomes more attractive to us. And if we decide we really dislike someone, even if we thought they were attractive before, they are going to become less attractive to us because they're annoying, they're mean, whatever it is. So what is good becomes beautiful, basically. And we will go over one more thing here. What I'm going to go over is being liked. One of the strongest determinants on whether we like someone is the belief that they like us. For the Curtis and Miller experiment, they led some people to believe that another person liked them, and they led other people to believe that same person disliked them. In subsequent interactions, the people who thought they were liked behaved in more likable ways. They disclosed more information about themselves, they disagreed less with this person, and they behaved in a warmer way. This is another example of that self-fulfilling prophecy. Being liked makes the heart grow fonder. The greater our insecurity, the greater our self-doubt, the fonder we grow for the person who does like us as well. So, for example, in Walster's experiment, female college students were waiting to receive the results of a personality test. And while they were waiting, they were approached by an attractive guy who was actually a Confederate in the experiment. And he would start talking to this woman, and all of these women were heterosexual. He would indicate that he liked her and ask her for a date. And then she would go in, and the experimenter would tell her her results. Half of the time, she got positive descriptions of herself, positive personality results, to temporarily raise her self-esteem. Half of the time, she was given negative description of herself to temporarily lower her self-esteem. And then finally, the student was asked to rate how much they liked a list of people. And the researcher would say, how much do you like this teacher? How much do you like a friend? And then he would say, and since we have one space left, why don't you rate that guy that you were waiting with in the hallway? That Confederate. The students who had received the unfavorable descriptions rated him as higher than the people who had received the favorable descriptions. Because they had that lower self-esteem, the person who obviously liked them, they liked more as well. We like to be liked, and the more insecure we feel, the more we like someone who likes us. A person who feels insecure may even seek out less attractive people to diminish the possibility of being rejected. So, for example, in Kiesler's experiment, Kiesler and Barrel, they led male college students, heterosexual male college students, to believe that they had either done very well or very poorly on an intelligence test. Then they took a break, and the researcher said, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee at this cafe together. So they go get a cup of coffee. They, when they entered the cafe, the researcher would recognize a female student who was seated alone at the table and would say, hey, let's go sit with her, and would introduce this male participant. Obviously, this female student was a Confederate of the study. Half of the time, this woman was dressed attractively. Half of the time, she was dressed plainly. The researchers observed the degree of romantic interest displayed by the male participant. Things like, did he ask to see her again? Did he offer to pay for her coffee? Did he ask for her phone number? Did he try to get her to stay longer, to keep talking? Those sorts of things. The people who felt secure about themselves because they had received a higher intelligence score showed more romantic interest towards the attractive woman. The ones who had received the negative intelligence score, who felt insecure, showed more romantic interest towards the unattractive woman. Because they felt insecure, they didn't want to get shot down, and so they only flirted with the unattractive woman. So, final question for you in this. Who would you be more attracted to? Someone who seemed like they were playing the field, like interested in everyone, or someone who seemed totally into just you? The answer is someone who seems like they are interested in just you, not interested in a lot of people. For Eastwick and Finkel's study, what they did was they did a speed dating experiment. They took a group of young women and men and had them do speed dating, where you have multiple dates, but you just talk for a few minutes. And then at the end, they had to evaluate each of those short dates on the desirability of the person, their attractiveness, how much chemistry they felt, whether they would agree to another date with that person, and the perceived selectivity of the other person. How many other people they expected their date to say yes to want to go on another date with. The people who reported more interest for all dates, who were willing to try a second date with everyone, were also perceived by their dates to have low perceived selectivity, to be highly likely to say yes to all potential second dates. And their dating partners regarded these people, the ones with low perceived selectivity, as being less desirable and having less chemistry with them. They didn't like the people they thought were not selective, who were willing to like everyone. And that is where I will stop for this video.